In the year 537, a Roman emperor walked into a building that should not have been possible. He stood beneath a dome that seemed to float, no visible support, no logic holding it up, just light pouring through 40 windows at its base, making the stone crown above him look weightless. Legend says he raised his arms and declared, "Solomon, I have surpassed thee." He wasn't exaggerating for effect. He was right. And the world has never stopped trying to catch up. This is the story of a single building in Istanbul that rewrote the rules of architecture and never let them go. To understand why Hagia Sophia had to exist, you need to understand the man who built it and the crisis that nearly stopped him. Justinian I inherited an empire that was, on paper, the most powerful on earth, the Eastern Roman Empire, ruling from Constantinople, wealthier and more connected than Rome itself had ever been. But in January 532, that empire nearly burned to the ground. It's called the Nika Revolt. Chariot racing fans organized into two furious political factions turned a stadium argument into an uprising. For a week, mobs tore through Constantinople. They set fire to half the city. They burned the original church of Hagia Sophia to the ground. It was the second church on that site to be destroyed by fire and fury. Justinian's own advisors told him to flee. He didn't. His soldiers crushed the revolt by some ancient accounts, killing 30,000 people in a single day inside that same stadium. And then Justinian made a decision that would echo for 15 centuries. He wasn't going to rebuild the old church. He was going to build something that had never existed before, a statement so overwhelming that no one would ever again doubt who ruled this empire or who ruled it in the name of God. He gave the job to two men who weren't even architects by trade. Anthemius of Tralles and Isidore of Miletus were mathematicians and physicists, men who studied geometry, mechanics, and the behavior of light. In hindsight, that's exactly why what they built worked. They weren't thinking like builders. They were thinking like engineers solving an equation no one had solved before. How do you put a perfect circle on top of a square and make it look like it's floating? Here is the problem every architect before Justinian's team had failed to solve. A dome is naturally round. A room, for practical reasons, is naturally square. For centuries, builders across Rome, Persia, and the Mediterranean had tried to marry the two and always compromised. Domes sat on round buildings, like the Pantheon in Rome. Or square buildings got small, awkward domes that didn't fully cover the space. Anthemius and Isidore refused to compromise. Their answer was a structural device now taught in every architecture school on Earth, the pendentive. Imagine a sphere sitting inside a cube. Now, imagine slicing away everything except 4 curved triangular sections in the corners. Those curved triangles, the pendentives, do something remarkable. They gather the outward, downward force of a circular dome and funnel it down into just 4 points, the corners of a square. Suddenly, a perfect circle could sit on a perfect square. The geometry problem that had stumped builders for 500 years was solved in one design. The dome itself is almost 183 feet, 56 meters above the floor. Its diameter stretches over 105 feet, nearly 32 meters. For almost 1,000 years, it was the largest interior space on Earth. Nothing surpassed it in scale until the Renaissance. But size wasn't the trick that made people gasp. Light was. Around the base of the dome, the architects cut 40 windows in a continuous ring. Structurally, this should have weakened the dome catastrophically, removing material from exactly the point under the most stress. Instead, it created the building's most famous illusion. Sunlight pours through that ring from every direction, washing out the shadows where the dome's supports should be visible. Byzantine writers describe the dome as hanging, as if by a golden chain from heaven. It doesn't look like it's resting on the building. It looks like it's floating above it. This wasn't decoration. It was propaganda through physics. Justinian wanted people to feel the presence of the divine the moment they walked in, and light, not paint, not gold, was the tool that did it. And it almost didn't survive its own ambition. In 558, just 21 years after the building opened, a series of earthquakes cracked the eastern half of the dome. It collapsed. Justinian was in his 70s. He called in Isidore's nephew Isidore the Younger to rebuild it, and the fix mattered almost as much as the original design. The new dome was built slightly steeper, slightly taller, about 20 feet higher than before, which reduced the outward thrust pressing on the walls below. Ribbing was added to the shell, channeling weight more efficiently down into the pendentives. It's a detail historians love, because it captures something essential about Hagia Sophia's legacy. This building didn't just introduce a new idea. It became architecture's first real-world laboratory for testing that idea, failing, adapting, and improving in full public view. Every dome built after Hagia Sophia, knowingly or not, inherited lessons paid for by that 558 collapse. For 900 years, Hagia Sophia stood as the center of Eastern Christianity, the model for churches across the Byzantine world, from Ravenna to Kiev. Then, in 1453, Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Empire. Sultan Mehmed II rode into the city and, according to tradition, went straight to Hagia Sophia. He didn't destroy it. He converted it into a mosque, and in doing so, he made a decision that changed architecture for the next 5 centuries. He kept the dome. Ottoman architects, especially Mimar Sinan, studied Hagia Sophia and spent generations trying to match its monumental dome. Sinan developed these ideas through the Shehzadeh and Suleymaniye mosques, before creating the Selimiye Mosque, which he considered his masterpiece. Hagia Sophia's influence also reached Renaissance Europe, where architects faced the same challenge of creating enormous domes that seemed to defy gravity. From St. Peter's Basilica to St. Paul's Cathedral, the U.S. Capitol, and the Taj Mahal, the dome became a universal symbol of power, faith, and permanence. Hagia Sophia's greatest architectural achievement was its solution to the problem of placing a circular dome over a square space through pendentives, creating an interior that seemed almost weightless and infinite. Even today, its influence can be seen across the world's monumental architecture. After surviving earthquakes, wars, empires, and religious transformations, Hagia Sophia remains not just an ancient monument, but an architectural idea that the world continues to copy.